because the way you know the thing in your thoughts is on a higher level than when you speak about it. And by forcing yourself to bring it into letters and words, it's the same thought, but there's an intellectual activity there which reveals deeper levels of the thought. So you really know it better by speaking about it. And that's the innovation of Torah studying, the advantage of Torah study, the way we study Torah as opposed to the way people learn in school. Like when a child comes to school, so the goal is to teach the child to read and to read quietly by himself or herself. Whereas you go to yeshiva and it's very noisy because everybody is learning out loud. And the more they're learning, the louder they're learning. We mentioned, I think even last day, that the wife of Rebbe Meir, Bruria, said that she was a tremendous scholar herself. And since the students used to run away from her because she was so brilliant, she said, if you're not learning with all the limbs of your body, your learning won't last. But you have to learn with such an involvement, complete, total physical involvement with what you're learning. Okay, so the question in front of us is, how is it possible that it should be in our mouth, and from our mouth it will be in our hearts, to do it and in our actions? So we have to have in our heart a feeling of love of Hashem. How are we going to get it? And the Tanya is devoted to this idea that everybody has it. It's easy, it's near, it's approachable. Everybody can achieve this. And the Alter Rebbe gives many possible explanations, many possible ways of revealing this love. First and foremost is through meditation, through contemplation of the infiniteness of Hashem, through our own observation of the world around us, which enables us to perceive the majesty of Hashem, the overwhelming majesty of Hashem. We just have to look up into the heavens every morning as we come to class. Oh, Morim Einechem, lift your eyes up on high, and behold, Mi bara Eila, who created all this? Or we look around at nowadays in the springtime, the whole of nature coming to life, the infinite number of leaves and buds on the tree. By the way, that cone that I showed you from the tree outside our house, the cones with each cone had hundreds of petals on it, each of them perfectly made. Well, those petals are now turning into berries. We have a mulberry tree outside the house. It gets bigger and bigger every year. And so when we think about Ma Gadlu Ma'asecha, Ma Rabu Ma'asecha, how manifold is your creation, how the infinite number of things that are being created in the world the whole time is so amazing that it inspires us with an awe and an admiration and a love for the life force behind them. Or we, like the Rambam says, when we observe the sun go in the country, you get to see it better, passing over us day by day, rising in the east, crossing over, setting in the west. As the year goes on, moving to the winter, the sun takes a lower trajectory across the sky. And the summer takes a higher trajectory in the sky. And then the moon follows it, and the stars follow. So you see the whole universe is moving. Who's moving it? Says the Rambam, very simple words. There must be a hand moving it. What is that hand? So a person is intellectually open. You open your mind, the eyes of your mind. You perceive the greatness of Hashem all around you. This inspires a feeling, a desire to be connected to this great source of life that pulsates through the universe. Then the Alter Rebbe addresses a different question. He says, what if I don't have it? I don't have that capability of thinking into the greatness of the creation. And then realizing that if the creation is so great, Hashem must be even greater. Like my dear friend Rabbi Barnett would do it when his children were very young. His children are now malamdim in the yeshiva and shluchim and so on. But he used to take them to the zoo, in the Bronx Zoo. He would take them to the elephants. You see how big this elephant is? I said, well, yeah, I have little children, 2, 3, 4 years old. See how big this elephant is? He said, well, Hashem is even bigger than the elephant. This is an intellectual realization. Well, what if a person doesn't have it? He can't make that jump. Nothing inspires him to make that jump. His parents never taught him that way. His teachers never taught him that way. Maybe his teachers even made learning a negative experience, an unhappy experience, a humiliating experience. So he's not interested in going down that path at all. How can love be so near to him? So the Alter Rebbe now gives us in this chapter the idea that we inherit it. We inherit this from our great ancestors, the mountains from which our life is hewed out. Avram, Yitzchok, and Yaakov, Sarah, Rivka, Rachel, Leah, the fathers and mothers of the Jewish people, spiritual giants, and we come from them. We inherit their qualities. A person is musical. His children may also be musical. And if his children aren't musical, his grandchildren might be musical. It could jump back a generation. Or similarly, artistic talent goes through the generations, or literary talent, or psychological talent, or the intellectual talent, or the talent to be able to explain one's ideas, a sense of humor, something that also goes through the generations. Some people have it, some people don't. Where do they get it from? Well, his grandfather was always a joke. Everybody always enjoyed his presence. Okay, so we inherit the talent in every single Jewish person. This is what the Alter Rebbe is saying in chapter 18, is the love of Hashem. This is innate. It's innate. And we have to know that when we meet a Jewish person, we meet a Jewish man, a man meets a man, asks him to put him on tefillin. A woman meets a lady in the mall, asks her if she would like a Shabbos candle. This is what you're relating to. You're relating to that innate love that's in the heart of this person. Remember the story I told you last week about the Israeli guy who was so far from Yiddishkeit, and when a boy on Fifth Avenue and 47th Street asked him if he'd like to put on tefillin, so for the first time in his life, he said, "Yeah, you know what? All right." And then after he said, "I don't know why I did that. I never put on tefillin. I don't. It's not my." And how it led to a whole awakening in him, and how he became avenged from this one encounter. He became frum, and his wife was an Arab, converted and became Jewish, and amazing. Okay, so where does this all come from? It all comes from an inheritance. We inherit it. It's in our genes. It's like the intuitive knowledge. How does a spider know how to make its web? How does a bird know how to migrate, how to navigate? That's how we have in our soul the love of Hashem. So now the Alter takes us a step further. So let's take this to the next level. Why does this happen? Why does this happen? So the last thing we're speaking about before Shabbos was something that's mentioned in the second chapter of the Tanya in a note. And then in the sixth chapter of the Tanya, also in a note. There's a saying that's brought in the Tanya that the Torah is poor in certain places and rich in other places. And something that's mentioned in a word or two in one place may be spoken about at length in great detail in other places. So this is what we've got here. We've got a more lengthy explanation of what it says there. That this is what we said last day, that the quality of love that's inherited in every Jewish soul is because every soul is connected to the highest level of Chokhmah. Through the enclothement, his slabshus, one thing is enclosed in, like you put on your clothes, so you're enclosed in your clothes. Your clothes are something that you wear. So our neshama also needs clothes, and the clothes of the neshama could go higher and higher and higher. Like my neshama has a certain set of garments, but these garments also have a set of garments, and these garments also have a set of garments. We don't have any Russian speakers in this class this year. Usually we have one or two, or Miriam, but Miriam's not here today. There's a word for it, this Russian doll that they make, that it's in two parts, and you see a babushka there, a Russian lady, and you take it apart, and there's another one inside. You take it apart, there's another one inside. Take it apart, another one inside, like the rings of an onion, one after the other, after the other, after the other. So the soul has many levels. The Tanya introduces this idea to us from the Kabbalah. If we didn't learn Tanya, how would you know such a thing? Well, Kabbalah is very popular. You see diagrams about it all over the place now. The idea of 10 aspects, the DNA of creation. The first thing that Hashem created was a form of 10 aspects, totally within himself. But the fact that out of the infiniteness of his being, he started, you can't really talk about starting means a time sequence before or after, but this is what happened, that these 10 aspects, call them spheres, emerged within himself. They are the very earliest form of vessels. Vessels can contain light. And this chapter is going to explain also that a vessel is an idea of a limitation. A vessel, what does a vessel do? A vessel contains something. We call it a vessel. A vessel contains something else. A vessel is like a bottle that contains liquid. So the vessel contains the liquid, and the vessel not only contains the liquid, but it limits it. It gives it a shape and a form. If the vessel has a color and the liquid has no color, like water, you put water into a yellow bottle, you're going to look at this bottle, you're going to see yellow. If it's a blue bottle, you're going to look in the bottle, you're going to see blue. So that it influences that which it contains. So this is the idea. We see that the first two of the 7 spheres, these 10 spheres, this is the Alter Rebbe in chapter 3, subdivide into 2 levels, which he calls mothers and 3 mothers and 7 days of creation. What does that mean? That means that the 3 aspects of the intellect called Chabad, Chachma Bina Das, are called mothers. And he says, why? Because mothers generally have children. And then come the other 7 attributes, which are the children of Chabad, of Hashem's intellect, the other 7 attributes. So when the light of Hashem, having created, say, one of these attributes, called Chesed, first is Chesed, which is kindness, because the whole of creation is made with kindness. Hashem makes everything with kindness. When Hashem shines his light into the quality of kindness, first there has to be a quality of kindness. So within Hashem, this quality of kindness emerges. It's not a separate creation. It's something within Hashem. but it's you have to say it's a step down from the total simplicity of Hashem's existence. And when Hashem shines his infinite light, so we have a lot of things you have to define here. What does it mean, his simplicity? What does it mean, his light? What does it mean that he creates a sphere? When he shines his infinite light into this sphere, which is chesed, and since it's within him and he is infinite, this sphere is also infinite. So it's infinite light into an infinite vessel. And what happens when he shines his light into this vessel? So the Torah tells us a great miracle happens. Yehior, Hashem, and this is expressed in words. That the Torah uses the metaphor of speech. Speech means to reveal something. You're sitting there, you're sitting in a room quietly, all by yourself. The dorm mother comes in. She wonders, why are you sitting in your room so quietly? She doesn't know. You have to tell her, I'm thinking. Good. You answered her. Your words, I'm thinking, tells her what's going on with you, because otherwise she doesn't know. Are you in pain? Are you sick? Are you feeling okay? Did you take something? What's going on with you? She doesn't know. When you say, I'm thinking, you let her know where you're holding, where you're at. Speech reveals, okay? So therefore, when we're talking now that Hashem reveals himself, the Torah uses a metaphor of speech. And Hashem said, let there be light. He shines his light into chesed, and there's light. Next step, the opposite, that's chesed. Gevura. Hashem shines his light, which is infinite, into the second quality, which is also infinite, called gevura, which is restriction, discipline, strength. You have a horse. The horse is galloping away. The rider pulls on the reins, slows the horse down. That's restriction. It's gevura. Who's stronger, the horse or the rider? The horse is stronger physically. Practically, the rider is stronger. The rider tames the horse. Gevura restricts the infinite light. So now it can be quantified. It can be broken down. And so the second day of creation tells us what Gevura is all about. Hashem said, in the beginning, it says there's water upon the face, there's darkness upon the face of the deep. So Hashem says, let there be light. Okay, now there's light and there's darkness. We have a day. We have a beginning. We have a continuation. We have a day. Hashem says it's going to take this distinction between dark and light, night and day, a step further. Hashem says there's water over the face of the deep. There's only water. Well, you have to assume that there's air over the water. So it says Hashem's throne is hovering. You hover in the air. Hashem's throne is hovering over the deep. Says the Balaturim, this is the spirit of Moshiach. So the spirit of Moshiach is there from the beginning of creation. It's there. Everything is created with kindness. Before the kindness is the spirit of Moshiach. Now we go to the quality of Gevura. Hashem says, this is not good. I need an arena where people can do mitzvahs, so we need to have land. So Hashem says, we've got to split up the water. This is the very first thing that's going to lead to the splitting of the Red Sea, way, way down the line. We have to split up the water and divide it into two parts, an upper level of water and a lower level of water. So Hashem says that there has to be a rakia between the water. And rakia we translate as heavens. Or some they say our firmament, separating lower waters from upper waters. Well, the lower waters, we know what they are, and we're going to find out what they are on the third day of creation, that they're rivers and lakes and oceans. What are the upper waters? Those, my dear students, are a mystery. We don't understand what they are. It says these are waters that are above the heavens. Above the heavens. And the word Shamayim means heaven. Shamayim means Sham Mayim. There's water up there. And them are hills. Up and above the heavens, there's water. But what kind of water? Not water that we know of. Water we know of is in rivers and lakes and oceans. Turn on the tap and you get the water. The water, it's a spiritual water. A source of water. What is it exactly? Shamayim. Well, we understand on our own level that there's water in the heavens because we know principle of the water cycle. Water evaporates and it comes into water vapor and joins together. It comes into clouds. The clouds cause rain. Rain comes from the heaven. It falls to the earth. Is a metaphor for the Torah, which comes from on high, comes down to us, life-giving water. We have to have water, or else we have drought and famine and war. Okay, so this is the quality of Gevura. This is a metaphor to teach us that the second vessel, the first vessel is kindness. The second vessel is strength, Gevura, and separates between the lower waters and the upper waters. Okay, so this is the process of creation is set into motion, and there are 7 stages. And the Alter Rebbe says these are called, I guess is a Kabbalah term. I'm not a student of Kabbalah. All I know is the few pieces of information, a few little drops that the Alter Rebbe gives us in the Tanya. 7 days of creation. When Hashem shines his light into these 7 attributes, which he creates in himself, we get the 7 days of creation. The 7 days of creation are lessons in the DNA of creation. The total DNA is tenfold, a tenfold structure. This tenfold structure will be found in everything in the whole world. And you can apply this. We do this in class, Tanya 101, that we discuss how a person wants to undertake a project. This project is going to go through, if it's completed and goes to the end, it will go through all these 10 stages, from conceiving it down to the final stage of creation, which in terms of the story of that's told in the first chapter of Bereshis, Shabbos. Hashem creates the 7th day, shines his light into the 7th attribute, and we have Shabbos. That's called Malchus. That is the final creation itself. The kingdom, the project that I wanted to make, I made it. Here it is in its final, complete form, Baruch Hashem, and now I can enjoy it. I can rest from the act of creation. I don't have to create anymore. It's creating itself. Hashem says, now I am creating the whole process, bringing the whole process into existence every single second, but I'm not adding another stage into the creation. It's 10 stages, not 11. It's 10 stages, not 9. Where does it all start? It all starts with Chachma. And what we're trying to show is that Chachma, the Chachma of Hashem, is the beginning, the very first initial stage, all within Hashem. And from this, all these 10 stages being within Hashem, it becomes possible that these 10 stages should then become realized, manifest, revealed in the next stage down, which is a whole different world. Because now we're moving from Hashem into creation. Between Hashem and creation, infinite difference. Now, where do we start? How can we can't really know. We can never know, because we are by definition limited human beings. How can we understand that which is totally infinite in every aspect of its infiniteness? We can't. Okay, we're going to try and find metaphors that'll give us at least some inkling of what it's all about. There are different metaphors. The Alter Rebbe gives us different metaphors. One metaphor is the sun and the rays of the sun. The rays of the sun shines into our homes. It's a beautiful sunny day here. We're very happy. The sun makes us happy. Hashem is compared to the sun, but the light that's coming into my window, filtering through the trees, coming into the window, that's not the sun. That's the sunlight. That's the light of the sun. It's something that escapes from the sun. The essence of the sun is so powerful that 93 million miles away, it still causes us to be warm. And this light of the sun, if it's connected to its source all the time. If there's a wall in between, it's blocked. It doesn't go any further. So the light of the sun is totally connected with its source in the sun. And if we could imagine, what is this ray of light, this beautiful ray of light shining into my room? What is it in its original source? Nothing. It's not a ray of light anymore. It's part of the source. It totally loses its identity. It has no identity of its own. Now here the mind has to make a leap and understand that the whole of this creation that we take for granted as a reality is a ray of light. It's just like a ray of light. It's something external that's escaped and appears to our fleshly eyes like it has an individual identity. But the truth is that ray of the sun is connected to the sun in its source, and in its source, it's not even a ray of the sun, it's nothing. And the whole of existence that we think is real is only a hiding of the reality that the ultimate reality, which is that we of our life in the source of our life, which is the sun. That's one metaphor. It has its limitations, but it's a powerful metaphor. Now, how are we going to understand this whole concept? Because what we have to understand here is the quality of Chachma and how Chachma is in every soul. So look, I'm going to show you something here. This is a blank. This is what we do in class. Okay. This is our whiteboard. Imagine we're in class, and this is the whiteboard at the front of the class. Okay. Now, do you see anything on this? No. There's nothing for you to behold. It's just the whiteboard. Okay. Now imagine this whiteboard is also a metaphor. What's it a metaphor for? Is everybody with me? Any questions?
Yes, we're here, Rabbi.
What? What's the question? Miriam.
No questions.
I recognize your voice. Hi, Miriam.
Hi, Rabbi.
Is it hot, Miriam, in Florida?
I'm in Mexico right now.
You're in Mexico. Is it boiling hot there?
Yes, it's hot right now.
Okay. So here, let's say that there's absolutely nothing defined on this whiteboard. There's nothing. There's not a letter. There's not a shape. There's not a line. There's not a dot. Let's say this is a metaphor. This whiteboard is a metaphor for the infinite. It's infinite, has no form, has no limitation whatsoever. It's totally unlimited. So let this be a metaphor, an image for us to think about that which is totally unlimited. Whiteboard. Now comes along Beethoven, and he wants to write his 5th symphony. He wrote 1, he wrote 2, he wrote 3, he wrote 4. Now he's going to write his 5th symphony, the most famous symphony that he's ever going to write. Right? It's got to start somewhere. Where is it going to start? It's going to start with the first note. Right? The first note of the symphony is going to be, he's going to have his ledger, the 5 lines, a musical note, and he's going to make a note somewhere on these 5. Well, he's got to make the 5 lines first, right? So, but let's say he's going to make a note. That note is going to be, what's a note? How do we make a note? Where's my pencil? Here's my pencil. How do we make a note? Okay. How do we make a note? We make a note that I make a point. I make a point, a dot. That's going to be my first note. Can you see the dot? You see it on my screen. I don't even see the dot. Okay, here's the dot, and we're going to give it a thing, and we're going to, there you go. Here is a musical note. Looks like a little flag with a dot. Okay, we're going to put it somewhere, put it on G major, G minor, something. Okay, we made the note. Now, that's going to be the start of the symphony, and that note is going to lead to a second note, a third note, a fourth note, and all the notes are going to come from that very first note. Just like in the Tanya, everything comes from that pasuk. The thing is very near to you. It's in your mouth, your heart to do it. Let's get back to the infant. Here, there's absolutely no definition of anything. This is the total infiniteness of God. Before Hashem created the world, there was only He, nothing else. There's only He. We don't even say, I mean, later we do say, but at this point, we don't even say there is only He and His name, because His name is already something that's not the essential essence of Himself. Now, the Rambam says the first thing we have to understand in the Book of Wisdom, the Rambam's magnum opus, his great work, the Yad HaChazaka. First thing he has to tell us is that we have to know the fundamental principle of existence is that Hashem is the first thing found. Okay, the Mekubolim, they disagreed with him. Hashem is more than that. The Rambam says no, because Hasidus explains, Hasidus explains that the Rambam is focusing on a certain level in the DNA, which is the level of knowledge. And on that level, you could say, get away with what he is saying. So that's where we are. But the Mekubolim say, no, Hashem is even much more than that. So let's deal with that. The Hashem is the first thing found. That's the beginning of reality. We don't have anything created yet. We have only Hashem. Total unlimited existence. The first thing that exists is Hashem. And that's the reality of existence, is all based on the reality of His existence. And if His existence is not real, then nothing is real. Because everything that exists derives from the reality of His existence. Okay? Let's say that again. Everything that exists because of the reality of Hashem's existence. And if Hashem's existence is not found, then nothing will be found. Now, think of this. I had a student once, he came to me, he said, Rabbi, in college, I'm studying anthropology. My teacher says that the world is billions of years old and we come from apes. And how do you're saying the world is 5,738 years. That was when that happened, when he spoke to me, when we had this conversation. What am I going to do with this? I said, don't be frightened. Ask your teacher, if we come from primates, where did the primates come from? And see what he says. Whatever he answers you, ask him again. Well, where did they come from? And then see what he says. And then ask him, well, where did that come from? And see what he says. And don't let him off the hook. He came back the next day. He was laughing. I said, what happened? He said, I did what you suggested. I asked the teacher, where did the primates come from? And he says, well, they came from some kind of creature that came out of the ocean. He says, well, where did these creatures come from? He says, well, they were probably generated in the ocean itself. He said, well, where did the ocean come from? Well, the ocean came from the creation of the earth. So where did the creation of the earth come from? It came from a big explosion, a big bang. Well, what this bang? This bang was made up of gases. A star exploded. Where did the star come from? It came from a bigger star, which broke down. What was the star? Star was made up of gases. Where did the gases come? He kept on asking him, where did the gases come from? Finally, the teacher said, well, I don't know. I guess you have to say it was an act of God. I said, okay, you won. You proved your point. Now, I'm going to go back to our, if you're going to say that after that initial act of creation, we can talk about evolution. From this point, we're going to call this point here the beginning of creation. And from here, the whole world is going to evolve on a bell curve till we get to where we are now. And this is where we're going, but this is where we're at now. Okay? The arrow is where we're at now. Here, the arrow is where we're at now. And here's where it all begins. So let me ask you, logically speaking, can you see this? Yeah, can you see it? No, you don't see it. Now you can see it. Logically speaking,
we can see.
Here's where it starts. And here's the bell curve of evolution, representing all the billions of years of development of the world. If it all starts here from this point, isn't that amazing? That the whole of creation as we know it could start from such a point of the gases, which became a star, which exploded, which became the earth, which became oceans, which became fish, which became living creatures, which came up on the land, which became apes, which became people. And here we are now, we got to this point. Isn't that amazing? The tremendous insight and wisdom in such a point. How could it possibly be random? Very difficult to say that the world that we live in, which is so orderly, I mean, just look at the, like we said in the beginning, the stars moving across the heavens and the seasons repeating themselves, 4 seasons. We don't have, year after year, the same 4 seasons repeating themselves. The orderliness of molecules, salt, the indestructible molecule, can't combine with anything, preserves everything, never breaks down. So many amazing things, all from this one act. Isn't that amazing? This is where it could all begin. Wow. And we got, does it make, if we're dealing with such an amazing thing, does it make any real difference if the beginning is here? Or maybe it could have been earlier. Or maybe it could have been later. Does it make any difference? The infiniteness of what we're entering. Does it make any difference where it starts? It's totally arbitrary. It could have started yesterday. And we would have found the whole world just the way it is now. Says the Baal Shem Tov, yes. We have to understand. In fact, it started this morning. It's starting right now. It's constantly happening. It's constantly coming into being out of nothing. So if we're going to look, what's the first thing found? We're going to say it's gases. We have to understand the first thing found is Hashem. If we're looking for the first thing, we're going to find Hashem. That is the first thing. And if you're going to say, well, what came before that? Well, that's what we mean by Hashem. If you want to say that Hashem is not the first thing found, but he comes from something else, and that's the first thing found, says the Rambam, no, that first thing found, that is Hashem. And there is nothing found before him, because before the first thing found, you have only Hashem. You don't have even his name. Now, to get into creation, how are we going to get into creation? There has to be a beginning. There has to be that first point where it all starts. Now, let's say we go back to before there is that point, there is only the infiniteness of Hashem. And here I have my divine creating tool. This is my divine creating tool. I'm going to create the whole universe, the whole of creation. I'm going to do it to correspond to something within myself that is not yet created, has not yet emerged as a form. Where is it going to start? It's going to start at a point. Where is that point going to go? What is that point going to be? Right now, you see this marker? This is the infinite creating tool, and here is the infinite. Now I'm going to create something out of the infinite, something out of infiniteness. What's nothing? This point is nothing compared to the infiniteness. So I'm going to create nothing out of the ultimate reality. The first thing found is the real reality. I'm going to create nothing out of something, okay? But I'm going to call that nothing to be reality. So we're going to call it creating something out of nothing. We're going to say, now this is nothing, but it's really the opposite, okay? Now, I didn't do it yet. I'm about to do it, and I've got 1 minute left till we have to say goodbye till the end of the class. Now just think, did I create this point yet? No. Am I going to create it? Yes. What's going to happen after I create that point? I'm going to start a whole bell curve of creation from that point. And it's all going to come from that point, right? It's all going to emerge and develop from that point. And how it emerges is arbitrary. But yeah, I didn't make that point yet. But it's all just potential. What's the potential of that point that I didn't make yet? You following me? Tikva, are you following? Miriam, are you with me?
Yes, I'm here, Rabbi.
The potential of that point that I didn't make yet. It's the potential to make everything. That's called Chachma. Because the word Chachma means koyach ma. Ma means what? It's a question word. Ma, what is a question word? What is the meaning of ma? Ma means I don't understand. It's beyond my comprehension. What is it? What's your name? What's this all about? What is what I don't know? So this is the power of what I don't even know. And it's a koyach. A koyach means a potential. That's the first thing that Hashem, that in the DNA of creation is this point. It's the potential of a thing to be what it is. But what it is infinite. You see, that's what you all are, every one of you. You're infinite. No one can pin you down and quantify you. You're way, way, way greater than anything that a person might say, or you even might think about yourself. That's the infinite that's invested in you. Okay, this is Chachma. That's where it all begins. That's the beginning of all beginnings. But before the beginning, there is Hashem. Have a great day, everybody. We're 2 minutes over our time, so we'll see you Mirz Hashem tomorrow.
Thank you, Rabbi Pape.
Thank you so much, Rabbi.
Thank you, Rabbi. You too.
If you have questions, you want to clarify what we spoke about today, write them down now so you won't forget, and you'll ask me tomorrow morning before we start, okay?
Okay. Say hello to Mrs. Pape.
Somebody came over to me yesterday and said, I'm glad to see that at long last Machon Yadus made it onto the internet. I said, how? He says, I saw your shir online.
Okay, good morning.
Good morning.
Okay.
Good morning.
Good morning.
Okay, we're going to be doing Hilchos Beichos Hanenin, the laws of blessings before and after foods. And we're going to be using Kitzur Shulchan Aruch, the bridge form of the Shulchan Aruch. And we're using the translation by Davis. It comes in 2 volumes. It's Hebrew, English, and that's the text that we're going to use.
on the table?
There is another. Okay, could we have, okay, we're getting a second voice. Okay. Now, the Kitzur Shulchan Aruch was authored by Rabbi Shlomo Gottfried, and we have translations of this work. He lived in the 1800s, and he basically wrote this for a knowledgeable audience that were not beginners, but he wrote what he felt should be filled in their knowledge. So many things he takes for granted that you know it already, and he just is filling in. So you have to take that into consideration. The Kitzur Shulchan Aruch, if you want one that is only English, there's one by translated by Rabbi Yoel Tauger. And then the one that we're using is a Hebrew English one that is translated by Rabbi Davis. We're going to start with chapter 50. I think those in the dormitory have a copy. Am I correct? Okay. Now, so paragraph
Yes,
1.
Lord, beheaded by
One from iPhone. I cannot hear anything that is being said. It's not clear.
Can
in
you
any
hear me
way.
better now?
Yes. Okay, so no, fade it out again. So
I will text you.
okay, so I'm hoping that everyone will be able to get the text, that will be able to prepare and review on their own. So I'm going to go through in the order of that. We have chapter 50, Kitzur Shulchan Aruch. The Torah says, it says in Psalms that the earth and everything that is inside in the earth belongs to Hashem. Everything is consecrated, everything is holy, and you're not allowed to have any benefits for private use unless it's redeemed. And then the similar is to have a benefit from anything in this world is by making a blessing. That's the redemption. And therefore, person who makes a bracha, Hashem is giving him then the opportunity to benefit of the foods. There is no minimal amount that one obligates one to make a blessing to the beginning of the food, whether he eats the smallest amount or drinks the smallest amount. One is having a benefit from it. One has to make a bracha rishona, has to make the bracha before.
Rabbi, is that even if you're not going to swallow the food? So if you were just
no, that's only if you're going to be swallowing the food. We're going to be speaking about someone who tastes and then expels it. We're going to have that as well.
Okay, but I guess,
yes.
Sorry, I was thinking of, for example, like the grain of sugar. Like if I had just like 1 grain of sugar and put it on my tongue.
Swallow it. If you swallow
Yeah,
it.
I guess, but wouldn't it melt? Oh, I guess then I'd swallow the melted
Yes, it will.
sugar.
Yes, it will.
Okay.
It's the same as when one has chewing gum, has the sugar that's coating the gum. That's what you swallow.
Right.
You do make a blessing when you're going to be chewing gum, and it has a flavor. It has that sugar coating. Then you are swallowing that sugar, and you make a blessing before you chew gum.
That's true. Okay, thank you.
A person, now there is the general bracha of Shahakol, which includes everything was created by Hashem. So therefore, this is a blessing that covers everything. However, the Anshe Knesset Daila, the men of the Great Assembly, and our blessings in the form that we have them now are more than This was from the time of the second Beis Hamikdash. That was the time between the destruction of the first and the building of the second. You had the men of the Great Assembly who formulated our prayers and also our blessings. So this took place, let's see, the Purim took place 3404 from creation of the world, and it is before the common counting. It's 356. 4 years later, 3408 is when they started building the second Beis Hamikdash. So that would be 360, about 360 before the counting. So we're speaking about more than 2,000 years that the forms of the blessing that we say now have been in place. The men of the Great Assembly, among them were also the prophets. You had Daniel, you had the Chagi, Zechariah, Malachi, of the prophets of the 12 prophets that we have that recorded their prophecy. You had Mordechai was a member. You had Ezra, Nehemiah. These are members of the men of the Great Assembly. They were prophets. They were able to go to the heavenly world and be able to see what is needed to draw down the godly energy for all our needs. That expresses itself in the blessings and in our prayers. And everything is very exact. Every word, every letter, every detail, even when it comes to the nekudot, when it comes to the vowels, they're also very exact. If it's a patach, if it's a kametz, each one has a special significance and what kind of energy it draws down. The 22 letters are letters with which the world was created. The vowels are also included in the different levels of kedusha, of holiness, and therefore each of these letters, each of these words have a special significance in the godly realm. And therefore we keep very strictly to the form in which the blessings were made. So they instituted that there is the general blessing called Shahakol, that everything is included. Shahakol niya b'dvaro, everything was created through his words. Then they also have the more particular blessings, which would include the blessing for bread, which will include the foods of the meal, blessing for wine, which will include also all beverages that you drink at the time that you made a blessing over the wine and drink wine. And then you have in particular the blessings that are said over that which grows on the ground, and then more individualized blessings for those items that grow on halachic trees, which would be borei, pri, ha'etz. So paragraph 2, a person makes the bracha shahakol, and he made it over any food, including made a blessing over bread, and he said shahakol over bread, or for wine, he said shahakol. He has fulfilled his obligation, and you do not make another blessing. The food has been covered by that blessing. However, one may not do so. Since each category has its own blessing, that is how it was instituted by Anshe Knesset Agdela, the men of the Great Assembly. Each one has a particular energy that is drawn down by that particular blessing. So we do not minimize, and we say the particular blessing that is appropriate. And therefore, one should learn the blessings that should be said. So you do have lists of blessings for different foods, what category they go into. So there's little pamphlets that are available in the stores. That would be good that one familiarizes themselves with all the different foods and situations, which blessings would be appropriate. If one does not know what category it belongs to, or there is a halachic doubt on what blessing should be said, then shahakol is said. If one is able to have it in a meal, which includes bread, so it's been covered by the meal, so then there is no question. But other than that, the blessing shahakol is said. So let me give an example. What blessing is said over rice? Anyone? Rice? The blessing for rice is?
So I say mizono, but I
Okay,
know a lot of
mizono.
people say shahako.
Okay, so let's say, so that was I was waiting for it to hear. There were those who say a blessing mizonot. Okay? And then you also mentioned that in Chabad, we say shahako. How is that? So when it comes to the after bracha of Al HaMichya, the blessing after bracha for the 5 grains, it's exclusively the 5 grains. Only for wheat, baked items or cooked items that have in them the wheat or barley or spelt, oats, and rye. Only on these baked and cooked foods do you make Al HaMichya, the after bracha for the grains, only on these 5 grains. So if you have cornbread, exclusively cornbread, soy bread, rice bread, billet bread, all of these breads do not go as an after bracha, would not get an Al HaMichya. So as far as that is concerned, it's only the 5 grains exclusively. There is no argument about that. However, the Talmud tells us about 2 types of grains. That when we make the bracha before these grains, we make borei minei mizonos, meaning it creates foods that fill us, satisfy us. The Talmud tells us that there is a grain that's also satisfying, and that's called orez. So orez, the bracha before orez is borei minei mizonos. Then there's another grain that's called dochan. For that, the bracha is like any other foods that grow, would not go into the satisfying category that you make a borei mizonos. So if it's a cooked item, matters if you would either make a adama on it, or if it's a shahakal, if you make it into a flour. So orez and dochan have different rules. Orez gets a borei mizonos. Dochan gets, let's say you're going to make a bread out of dochan or orez. So orez would get a borei mizonos. The dochan would get a shahako. Okay, so that's pretty clear, no question. Orez gets a mizonos. Dochan gets a shahako. The question is, what is the definition of orez and what is the definition of dochan? It's one or two, and we don't have a clear definition of which is which. The 2 are either rice or millet. One of the 2 is orez, one of the 2 is dochan. So if we would know definitely, and it's been a tradition that orez is rice, then there would be no argument. Then everyone knows that since the Talmud tells us orez gets a mizonos, so then you get a mizonos. But since it is a question, and therefore that's where the doubt comes in. Now those who say a mizonos on rice, they say, well, most will translate orez as rice. And therefore we're going to keep that translation. And therefore, since the Talmud tells us that orez gets a mizonos, we're going to keep the translation that orez is rice. And therefore, when it comes to rice, before bracha is going to be borei minei mizonos. The after bracha is going to be borei nefashos. There's no argument about the after bracha. For rice, you make a borei nefashos after you've eaten it, even for those who make a mizonos. Because for the after bracha, it's only the 5 grains exclusively and nothing else. The bracha before, orez was added to the borei minei mizonos. So here we have the difference in different communities. The Alter Rebbe says that since it still remained a question, it was never resolved definitely that orez is rice, and there's also the possibility that dochan is rice and orez is millet. Therefore, we're going to keep it as a doubt. Therefore, either you have it during a meal with which you're going to make a motzi yachim min haaretz, it's going to include all the foods that you eat during the meal as a part of the meal. So then the orez and dochim will be included. If you don't, then let's keep it as a doubt, and therefore the bracha will be the doubtful bracha, which is shahakol. Okay, did I explain it clearly? Okay, so that's why. So as far as the after bracha, there is no difference in any community. Everyone says borei nefashos after rice. Whether you had a rice cake, you had rice flour, and you made a pastry out of it, whatever foods you've eaten, the rice content, the after bracha is always borei nefashos. So this is what we have in paragraph 2. If there is an unresolved doubt among the halachic authorities regarding to the blessing, then one would say shahakol. If possible, it's desirable to free oneself from the obligation of reciting a separate blessing if the food in question is eaten during a meal which includes bread. Okay. Paragraph 3. In what manner does a person make a blessing? And then also every detail in halacha has a special significance. And the dominant hand is the one that we're going to be holding the item on which we make a blessing. So when we're making a blessing, we hold the item in our right hand. If one is whatever the dominant hand is, if one is right-handed, they would hold it in their right hand. Someone is left-handed, they would hold it in their left hand. So you'll hold the food in your hand. If you're going to be drinking something, you hold the beverage in your hand. If it's something that you cannot eat with your hand, or you're eating with a spoon or a fork, you have the spoonful or the item that's on the fork, you hold that, and then you make the blessing. With the exception of when you're making a blessing on bread. We make the blessing on bread, we hold it with all 10 fingers. There's a special significance of the number 10 when you're holding bread. Bread is considered a staff of life. Also, with bread, we have the 10 mitzvos that are involved in the process of making the bread. So when we make the blessing on bread, we're also elevating all the 10 different steps that it took to make the bread and the mitzvahs that are involved with the bread. Also, we have, according to those who have learned Chassidus, number 10 is connected to the 10 spheros, the 10 different details of Chabad and Chesed, Gvur, Tiferes, Netzach, Yesod, and Malchus. It's connected to that. And also we have a bracha, we have a pasuk that we say in Ashrei that has 10 words. Before the bracha of Pesach Yadecha, before the sentence of Pesach Yadecha, open your hand and you give everyone their needs with goodwill. So we have the sentence right before that. Einei chayil eilecha yisaberu v'ata noisen lahem es achlam v'itoy. The eyes of all hope to you, and you give them their food in its proper time. So having all of this combined, so in all other foods that we make a blessing over, we hold it only on one hand. That would be the dominant hand. When it comes to bread, we hold it with all 10 fingers. We also infuse in the bread and get the blessings that Hashem is providing for us, our needs. Now, what happens if a person also should, before you make the blessing, you should know what the conclusion of the blessing will be. Not to go, what do I do now? So that when you recite Hashem's name, the essence of the blessing, you will know what the conclusion will be. What happens if a person did not hold the object, it was in front of him, it was on the table, and you made the blessing, then it is covered. You do not have to make another blessing. If the food that you're going to be making a blessing over was not in front of the person when he made the blessing, but it was brought into the room after the person made the blessing, even though you knew this food was going to be brought, and you wanted to get a jump on making the blessing. So the blessing does not cover the food, because the blessing over which food is being said has to be in front of you. And therefore, the obligation was not met, and you have to make the blessing again. So only on foods that are in front of you, only then that food is covered. We will have, let's see if we, now what about when you're drinking from a fountain? Anyone drink from a fountain? Okay, now so how do you make a blessing on the water that's in the fountain if the water that you're making the blessing over is disappearing? So how should you make the blessing over the fountain? So before you make the blessing, you press the button, you press the knob, and you have the water flowing. All the waters are then connected. It's considered that also, even though the water that is, while you're making the blessing, is flowing away, still that water is connected to the water that is coming, and it's considered as if you're making the blessing on the water that you're going to actually be drinking, and you are covered. So you are permitted to drink from a fountain, but you would, when you start the bracha, you would start the fountain, the water flowing, make the bracha, and then you drink of the waters. Number 4. When does a person have to make a second blessing? Even though they made a blessing, food that they ate will not be covered. Number 1, person was holding a fruit and made the blessing and dropped the food. So he's standing on a bridge, made the blessing on an apple, and before he had a chance to take a bite of the apple fell out of the hand, fell off the bridge. You don't have another apple, that's it. So that, or it fell down and spoiled to a point that you can no longer eat it. So then that blessing, it was not fulfilled. Same thing also, a person was holding a drink, said a blessing, the drink spilt. So now the rule is as follows. If you, back to the case of where you had an apple, standing on the bridge, apple fell down. If you had other apples, and you intended not only to eat this one, you intended to eat the others as well. So then when you made the blessing, it wasn't exclusively on the apple that you had in your hand. That was only the one that you're going to be making a blessing over. But the other fruits were going to follow. You were going to eat other fruits. You knew that you were going to eat other fruits. So then the blessing was not only on the fruit that you held in your hand, but it also included the other foods in the original blessing. And therefore, when you're going to eat, what you should do at that point is, without interrupting, take another fruit, take a bite of the other fruit that's available for you. If you did not have a specific intention of eating the other foods, then it's only to the food that you had in your hand. And therefore, you would have to say a second blessing. Now, this also applies when a person intended to eat or drink more, but that food was not before him when he recited the original blessing. And since the food that he had in his hand was not eaten, so then you would have to make a new blessings for that new food that you're going to be eating. So it's as follows: when you do make a blessing over a food, you're in the dining room, you made a blessing over a food, you made a blessing over an apple. You only had that apple in front of you, but you knew that in the kitchen there are other fruits that you also want to eat, you intend to eat. So when you make the bracha and you're able to eat of the food that you actually held in your hand, then the foods that are going to be served later, even though they were not in front of you, do not get a new blessing. Do not get an individual blessing because they are covered by the blessing that you made over the fruit. So when you make the blessing over the fruit and you intend to eat more, even if the other fruit are not in front of you, it is covered. However, in the case where the food that you were making the blessing over was not eaten because it fell down, so then only those fruits that are in front of you, you could take it right away and eat of it because your blessing has covered the food that was in your hand and the fruit that's in front of you, then you are covered with this blessing. However, even if you intended to eat other fruits, but they were not in front of you, you were not able to see them, so in that case, you would have to make a new blessing because the fruit that you had in your hand that you wanted to make the blessing over did not happen, and therefore the other fruits are not covered. So let me say it like, let me summarize this. So when a person is holding a fruit and you intend to eat more fruit, the blessing, you made a blessing, you ate of this fruit, so all other fruits that you're going to be eating in this sitting are covered. If, however, the blessing that you made over the fruit, that fruit was not eaten because it fell down, got lost over the bridge, in that case, only, and you intended to eat more fruit, only those fruits that are in your vicinity that you're able to see, it's in front of you, those fruits are covered, even though you did not eat of the fruit over which you made the blessing, but you could take immediately another fruit and bite into it, and that is covered by the blessing that you made. Is that, is it clear? The two cases? Any questions? Okay.
But I have another question.
Yes?
Bit related to that.
Mhm.
So if I at a Chabad dinner
Yes.
and something that's they bring in banana, know that they were going to bring in bananas as well.
I'm not, it's not coming across. I'm not getting, I'm lost with the, could I don't hear anything.
You can't stop it. Just proceed. Thank you.
Okay, so now, number 5. Okay, write down your question. Maybe at the end of class, you'll be able to continue with that. Number 5. Once a person makes the blessing, you have to immediately eat of the item that you made the blessing over. And one should not make any interruptions. Even the time it takes to say, Shalom Aleichem Rabbi, the time it takes to say 3 words, that itself is the minimum of how much you could wait from the time you made the blessing to the time that you eat it. Now, what happens, you took a bite of it and you're chewing and someone is speaking to you, or you hear a blessing, can you answer Amen? Or could you answer the person who is speaking to you while you're chewing the food and you did not swallow anything? So the question is, at what point is it considered that you're eating? Is it once you have it in your mouth and you're chewing, so then you've fulfilled that which the bracha was said over, or is it when you swallow? And the answer is, it's only when you swallow is it considered that you've eaten. And that'll come up, get to a question that we asked before. What happens if you're only tasting and you're not going to swallow the food, even though it's in your mouth, it's not considered that you're eating it, you would not have to make a blessing. So the fact that it's in your mouth does not mean that you've eaten it already. Once you make a blessing, you have to eat of the food. and swallow of the food. So therefore, until a person swallows the first bite, one should not make any interruption, even if it is to answer amen. Surely not to respond to someone's question or comment, even just to say yes or no. Also, that should not be done. Now, what happens if a person did speak between the time he made the blessing to the time that one ate? So then it depends. If it is an item that is needed for the meal, for the food that he wants to eat, then it's not considered an interruption. So we know that when you make hamotzi, you should dip the bread into salt. That's a part of the hamotzi, is having the salt. So what happens if a person made the blessing, and they see that there's no salt on the table? What should they do? And you want to sort of indicate that you need something. So how is it done? Any suggestion? Okay, motion. If a person is able to see, you make the motion of having salt. That's very good. And other people will say no. So a person who says no, people will turn to them and try to see what's the issue. And then at that point, they could motion that they need the salt. Or what happens if you are having bread with which you have to cut with a knife and there is no knife? So then you would say no, and you would go indicating that you want to cut the bread or challah. So that is not considered an interruption because that is needed for being able to eat that food over which you made the blessing over. A person who did speak about items that are not related to the food, then the blessing does not cover the food, and one would have to make a second bracha.
Rabbi, what is the thing we say when we, because then the first bracha would have been made in vain.
Bracha levatala, right? The bracha levatala, we say the Baruch Shem Kavod Malchuto Leolam Va'ed. We're indicating that we're not holding Hashem's name lightly. It was an error on our part that is not deliberate, but we're not trying to minimize the holiness of Hashem's name. So there was what we say, Baruch Shem, blessed is the name, both Malchus of the glory of his kingdom, L'olam Va'ed, forever and ever. So whenever a bracha was said in vain, we say Baruch Shem, Kvod Malchus L'olam Va'ed.
So if we made the blessing and then
we're going to be learning in a separate chapter what happens if a person begins a blessing and then they realize that they do not have to say the same blessing because they've said it already. A person remembers that they made the blessing already over the food. So then, as if you've said Baruch Atah Hashem, you could conclude with a sentence in Tehillim that says Baruch Atah Hashem Lamdeini Chukecha, teach me your statutes, and that is a pasuk. So we're going to transform from a blessing to a pasuk. So we've not completely said it in vain because we're now using Baruch Atah Hashem Lamdeini Chukecha, teach me your statutes. So that becomes a sentence of Torah. If anyone wants to know which sentence it is, it's in chapter 119 of Tehillim, and it is chapter 119 goes through all the aleph bays, and it has 8 sentences for each letter. So among the bases, we have sentence 12 in chapter 119 in Tehillim, Baruch Atah Hashem, Lamdeini Chukechas, teach me your statutes. So anyone who wants to look it up, it's 119, sentence 12. But we have a chapter for this separately, so we're going to, what happens if you said Elokei, Elokeinu, Baruch Atah Hashem, we have if you didn't say Hashem's name yet, that is not considered the blessing yet. So then you don't have to say anything. It's only once you said Baruch Atah Hashem, where we have to start thinking, is it a bracha levatol, is a blessing been said in vain? Now, there is an advantage of making a blessing over something that is complete. If you have that choice, unless you have to open the fruit to be able to check it if it has any insects. So other than that, we try to make a blessing while the food is complete. And therefore, after you've made the blessing, you want to cut the food. So that's not considered an interruption. That is a part of partaking the food. You want to make the blessing while it's whole. Let's say you're eating an apple and you don't want to bite into the apple. You want to slice the apple and have a slice of apple instead of biting into it. So in that case, you make the blessing, you hold it in your dominant hand, you make the blessing, and then you take the knife and you cut a section of the fruit, and then you eat of it. That is perfectly done well. You've had the advantage of making the blessing over the complete fruit, and the fact that it takes you time for you to cut it and then eat it, that is not considered an interruption.
Same thing with peeling?
Same thing as with peeling as well. If you take the peel off, it's still considered whole. In other words, if you're having an orange or a tangerine, without the peel, it's still considered whole. So one would make the blessing after they've taken the peel off the orange or tangerine, when it's still whole, make the blessing, and then you take a section, and that would be the proper thing to do. Number 6. When drinking water, did you ever notice that some people will pour a little water before they drink it? And did you ever ask for an explanation? Did anyone give you an explanation?
Rabbi, Rivka Leah told me about this. She said that basically there's something about like spirits and overnight, and if like something about leaving it overnight and some spirits or like something poisoning the water.
So it's not physical. It is more of a spiritual reason. There are the harmful effects that at one time used to hover over the waters. It since has been dispelled, but since it is mentioned in the Talmud about pouring some water before you drink it, so therefore there are those who do it as well. It's not something that is required, it's something that is done addition. Because the mazikin, those harmful effects, are no longer in place today. They were banished. So the Rebbe we did notice by Fabrangim, the Rebbe would drink of a beverage, he would pour a little out of his cup before he would drink of it. So it does not apply to wine. So before you drink wine, you don't pour any wine out. It'd only be on water. So before you drink of the water, there are those who pour some water out. So it's only exclusively for water. And so when should you pour that water? If one does pour water before they drink, when should they do it? They should do it before they make the blessing. So right after they make the blessing, you're not pouring out of that water of which you made the blessing over. You would rather do that before, and then you make the blessing. Number 7. Person who tastes food. Do you make a blessing before tasting food or not?
Depends if you're going to swallow it.
Okay, they're very good. Okay, if you do not intend to swallow it, you're tasting it to see if it needs more salt or any other spices. So if you're not intending to swallow it, we said that just keeping it in your mouth and chewing it is not considered eating. Same thing would also be if you're tasting it, you're not intending to swallow it. So then you're going to expel it. So you do not make a blessing before you're going to do the tasting. However, it's one of the questionable things is, why are you tasting it? If you're tasting it because you want to also have a benefit of that which you're swallowing, and you're going to be swallowing it. If you want to have a benefit from that which you're swallowing it, then it's considered that you're having a benefit of the food, and therefore one would make a blessing. So it is suggested that if you do intend to swallow the food that you're going to be tasting, have in mind that you're still going to do it as a food, as a beverage. You do want to have the benefit of it, and therefore it would be appropriate to make a blessing and then swallowing it and having the full taste of the food, if it's whatever it needs. But you're going to also intend that you're going to have some benefit of that which you're swallowing. If you don't intend to have any benefit, it's best not to swallow, but rather to expel after you've had some. Number 8. Do we make a blessing over medicines? What's your thoughts?
If it
Foods?
has no taste, then no.
That's correct. So right now we have as follows, that person who eats or drinks for medicinal purposes, if it's tasty, person enjoys it, then especially you have the flavored items, even if it's those syrups. So therefore, this is, you make a blessing. If the food is bitter and one does not enjoy it, then you do not make a blessing. There is an example that is given here that I don't know how people will react to it, but at one time, people used to eat raw eggs. They were not concerned about salmonella because I guess they had them fresh from the chicken coop. It was coming, and this was something that people were accustomed to eating raw eggs. And it seems that raw eggs are beneficial for the voice. Someone has a raspy voice, to coat the vocal cords with the egg whites is something that is beneficial, and therefore your voice will sound very pleasant, especially for those people who are, their voice is their vocation. They certainly want to sound well. Or someone who has a raspy voice and has to give a class, it's not very pleasant on the ears when you hear someone rasping away. So, and taking something to able to make the voice more mellow. So should you make a blessing if you're eating raw eggs? And the answer is yes. Person, even though they may not have a benefit of its taste, but you do want to, it's not bitter, it's not unpleasant, do benefit from the nutritional qualities, it does nourish him, and therefore it's appropriate to make a blessing. So one would apply this to other situations as well. If there are different foods that you eat, that it's because of its nutritional value, but it's not that tasty, but it still doesn't have a negative taste, where you would not want to eat it because it tastes terrible. You're only eating it for only for medicinal value or for its nutritional value, which you really hate to eat that fruit. But so then one would not make a blessing. But in case where it doesn't have has a neutral taste and it does have a benefit to it, so one would make a blessing.
Rabbi?
Yes. Yes.
Listen, I would say a blessing, but this sentence
We're fading out. I'm just getting like pings from the I'm not, could you text it? Let me hear, yes.
I said the blessing may it be your healing.
Sorry, could you text it?
Can you hear me?
Don't hear. So can we hear something? Try again. Yes, could we? Maybe you could send a text note. I can't hear anything. Okay. Okay. So we stopped at number 9. It's chapter 50, number 9, and we're going to continue with this chapter. So I hope you're able to get a text. I think in the dormitory it will be available. I don't know if it's available already. How many of you are in the dormitory? Who's in the dormitory? So, okay. So I think in the dormitory they brought copies. So all the best. Have a wonderful day. We're going to sign out now.
Thank you, Rabbi.
Okay. So are you in the dormitory?
No, I'm not, and I have a copy, but it's a different translator. But I sent a link in the chat to online on Chabad.org. They have the Davis translation.
Okay, so they're using the Talgo translation. Which translation are they using?
I'm not in the dorm, so I don't know what they're using.
I'm asking. You have there's the.
It's not in front of me right now. The one I have is by Art Scroll. It's also Kitzur Shulchan Aruch, but it's by 2 different translators. So I'm following along with the Davis one on Chabad.org. They have the exact text.
The Davis one. Yes.
Yeah.
Okay. Very good. Okay.
Okay.
All the best.
Okay. Bye-bye.
Thank you, Rabbi.
Okay. Okay. Have a wonderful day.
Thank you, you too.